Hey y'all, this is Farley with Writer's Edge podcast, and today I have a very special guest, Steve Martin of South Texas Tack. Welcome, Steve. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, I want to kind of, anytime we start the podcast, I always like to let my guests kind of introduce themselves and kind of tell us your story, because you're the best teller of your own story. So, I'll kind of turn it over to you.
Perfect. My name is Steve Martin. Like I said, I'm my wife and I are the founders and owners of South Texas Tack in Brenham, Texas. I'm 52 years old, so when you get to be my age, your story gets a little long, but I'll give you the condensed version. Grew up in Wichita, Kansas. Was around horses from a very early age. Began to be around show horses and contest horses about age 10, and got into it. Went to school at Wichita State University and got my education there, and really got into the show horses, the Western pleasure horses, and developed young horses. Was a breeder, a non-pro, trained my own, sold my own, and realized in the beginning that not all saddles and not all tack were created equal. And I was fortunate enough to travel around the country and meet some great craftsmen. And the one thing I picked up on very early was there's some tremendous craftsmen building these saddles, particularly, but a lot of them didn't have horses. And then when I'd ask them about their trees, they began to talk about their tree makers, and they very seldom had a relationship with them. And most of these tree makers I found didn't have horses. So I thought that was really interesting. So as my career went further and further into the horse business, I began to collect saddles and find saddles that just did more of what I needed them to do. And I really realized there was a big need for knowledge in that part of the world, all over the country, but in that sector, in the saddle business. And in 2003, my wife and I opened a store in Brenham, Texas, South Texas Tack. Felt like there was just a huge demand in this part of the world for quality products, and nobody down here had done it. So all these craftsmen I'd met over the years traveling around the country showing horses, I called them, and a lot of them obliged us to go to work for us and build for us, and most of them still do today. So that's really what we're all about, and that's the condensed version of my story. We're all about quality and value, and that's what we try to do. And we're supposed to know more than everybody else. If we're selling it and building it, we're supposed to know more than the consumer, so that's our job.
Well, absolutely, and that was a very nice condensed version there. So good job. I like that. So let's kind of dive in here. Let's talk about saddle fit. Knowing that we are on a podcast, we'll have to use our words, and I know often you need visuals and your horse is there and that kind of thing. But I think let's see if we can get some basics down so everybody can kind of. I think there's as we were talking earlier before we recorded, there's a missing foundation out there of saddle fit basics.
I really think there is. I think so many people, Farley, since we've been in business, since 2003, in the early years here, there was the demand for saddle fit wasn't very illuminated because I wasn't getting many calls. But in about 2007, 2008, I realized there was quite a demand. And I realized pretty quick that people knew what they had was possibly wrong. They just didn't know to what degree it was wrong. And they don't know until they see what right looks like. So until you show them proper saddle fit, they don't really know how good or how bad it is. So that's really what it's about. It's about resources, about information. It's a little show and tell. And I always tell everybody, really, this is my opinion. It's not a sales job, it's a service job, and it's strictly my institutional knowledge from saddling horses 5 to 6 days a week, my entire adult life. And you realize what to do, and then you can't discount what not to do. I think so many people in life don't realize the value in what not to do. It's very important. So I tell people as they come to do saddle fits here at South Texas Tack is to bring the stuff that's not working that you feel you have a problem with. So once I evaluate that horse or horses, we take their saddle and stick it up on there, and we evaluate the problems. They can see pretty quick as I point them out that's probably not correct. And then as we get a saddle or tree out of the store that particular needs, and they see what a correct saddle fit looks like. It's just kind of a oh me moment. They're like, wow. Now they know really what bad looks like because they brought bad with them, and now they know what correct looks like. Once they see it, you don't forget it. So that might change from horse to horse, but it just doesn't change. So it's pretty basic. It's pretty plain English, really.
So give us, in your words, kind of some of the basics to look for, and then or start with what not to look for, whichever way is easier,
Okay.
so we can kind of start building a foundation from there. Because, as we've established, yes, it's a lot easier to look at this and get that feel and that hands-on deal, but we'll start where we can.
You bet. So if you're listening or you're at home and you particularly maybe in the barn or have your horse in front of your horse in front of you, the first thing I do is I want to get my horse square, tie it up, have somebody hold it, make sure their head is straight, get right behind them, and I'm going to look at we're looking for symmetry or lack of symmetry through that whole horse's shoulder blades, below his withers. Typically, and it can be depending on how much the horse gets used, but once a horse really gets to reach to be 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, there'll be very few horses will be symmetrical, right or left. Horses will be more developed on one side than the other. A horse typically turns better going away from their stronger side. So if you have a horse that's stronger on the right side, that horse typically will turn and yield better going to the left. But once we evaluate that horse, we know what the wide side is because I want to make sure we accommodate the wide side. I know there's saddle fits being done throughout the country, and if the wide side happens to be the off side, the horse's right side, I think a lot of times they get missed. So I want to know what that horse looks like or horses, so we can accommodate that. And the next thing I do is I want to get a saddle up on there and take a look. So the saddle that's usually brought to the saddle fit, we'll get it up there and look. It's people start directly. The first thing they really want to know is what's the gullet. Well, the gullet for me, as we get into this, is kind of like the button on my shirt. I really don't care as a casual shirt if I can button that collar button. What I'm more interested about it is the bar spread and the relationship between the gullet measurement and the bar spread and the shape of the bar. The bar spread and the shape and the width is more like the shoulders of a shirt or a jacket. I want some flexibility. And I want to be able to move around and not be restricted and have a range of motion. In a horse's case, forward, reverse, right, or left. So we're looking for symmetry. Symmetry is a word I use a lot because we want a lot of symmetry. So it's almost impossible to have one tree, like particularly a ranch cutter that's real popular here at our store, fit every horse. So our goal needs to be realistic. We want to fit as many horses as possible, today's modern stock horse, Western stock horse, with as few setups as possible. When I say setups, that would be particularly our setup is going to be a 6 3/4 in the gullet. Our bar spread's 13. And I feel that setup with the bar pattern we use fits almost every horse. So almost, not every horse, but almost. And that's a realistic goal. So anybody that tells you that they have a setup that'll fit every horse, that's very unrealistic. So the takeaway from this is gullet is important, bar spread is really more important. But it's like a math equation. Whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other to balance. But so if your gullet's 6 3/4 and your bar spread's 13, if you go to changing the gullet, it's going to change the relationship. So that is the relationship that I found in this part of the world with today's modern horse, with the bars we use. Of course, all the bars are different on our different type saddles, but they fit just almost everything. So that's a good place to start.
Yeah, that's great because it really you starting off there with horses are not symmetrical. People are not symmetrical either, and I talk a lot about that here at Rider's Edge of how the rider works affects the horse and vice versa, but it also affects what goes in between the rider and the horse, and that's the saddle.
And there's a lot to it. So the next question, so if somebody's listening, they go, okay, we've talked about a 6 3/4 gullet and a 13-inch bar spread. They don't know what their saddle is. So something else for the listening public and the readership to know, once a tree has been built upon, it is basically impossible to measure it. I know what my trees are, so I can walk up in front of one of my saddles, South Texas Tack saddle, and I can show you where it's going to look like a 6 3/4 in the gullet and a 13 in the bar spread. But you got a lot of leather, sheepskin. The saddle is encased that tree, so you have to use your imagination. So once a tree has been built on it, you can't measure it.
Right.
I see people trying to do it all the time. You can't measure it. You just have to guess. So you have to have the knowledge. So if you're at home and you're gonna take your saddle, it's like you have a problem, your horse is square, you throw it up on there. The first thing I want to do is stick my hand. If I'm on the onside of a horse, I want to stick my left hand, palm facing up. I want to stick my hand up in there and see if I can actually get my hand up underneath the front of that bar. And 99.9 times out of 100, when you take a saddle fit customer in their saddle, you stick it up there and try to stick your hand in there, you can't even get your hand in there. So what it is the bar set up on the tree is wrong. The bars pad themselves are too wide, and there's no flare. I want a lot of flare on the front of my bars to where if you look at a horse is shaped like an hourglass. If you got on top and the cross section straight down, they're wider in their front and their back, and they wishbone out in the center. So your tree has to do the same. So we're looking for flare. So you need to have flare on both sides, and there's going to be a space. So if you look at one of our saddles as they're built, and you stick your saddle up on your horse with no pad, you're going to see a space in there, and that space is where the saddle pad goes. And I get a lot of people that when I'm doing a saddle fit, I'll throw one of our saddles up on a horse with no pad, and they're confused why we're not using a pad. Well, we want to see how much symmetry or lack of symmetry we have. So the only time I use a saddle pad in the exercise is when I'm just showing them what the final look looks like and talking about when we get into the saddle pad fit, because saddle pad fit is just a totally another issue. So the first thing we talk about, Farley, is going in and make sure that we have plenty of flare. Second thing we do is I'll stick my hand through the throat of a saddle, and the throat is up underneath the swell or the gullet, and I want to grab that horse's wither because that wither is a joint, and I want to make sure the throat of that saddle is wider than that horse's wither, because I just mentioned that wither is a joint, so it articulates and moves. If that throat is sitting right on the edge of that wither, even if you're a small person, that could really be an irritant to that horse and cause the horse to not perform well. Get a lot of people, since we're in that little gullet area, talk about, well, this front end is really low and I'm afraid it's going to rub. I don't remember the last time I ever saw a swell, the bottom of a gullet, rubbing a horse's wither, because by the time you pad up 3/4 of an inch or an inch, whatever, you're just going to raise it up. So that's just not an issue. But you want to make sure that your throat of your saddle is wider than the gullet. Then you want to follow that wither down as far as you can with your hand and make sure that bar follows the contour of your horse's back. That's really important because we don't want any bridging. You hear people talk. It's a word commonly used in saddle fit discussions is bridging. So we want to make sure that horse's back falls down off that wither, that profile, that bar follows it and contours it. Then the last thing I look for, and we're going to want to do this on each side, and the last thing I look for is I want to make sure the back of that saddle is down. The untrained eye typically will go to the back of a saddle, and if they see that, you instantly know you have a problem. But there's a lot of saddles that are problematic that I see they're down in the back, but there's so many problems up in the front that they assume that they're okay until they begin to use that saddle for several days and the horse starts to have some problems or not work. But what confuses them, the saddle is sitting down and back. Typically, a saddle will kick up in the back when it's too narrow in front somewhere to actually sit down on the horse. So that's a really important thing to look at. You can have a saddle down in the back and have some major problems in the front, and that's where we have to investigate a little further.
Absolutely. So you look at the front and through the middle, through the back, and you've done that by running your hand between the horse and the saddle. Are there other things?
Correct.
Are there other things that you check as far as saddle fit with, maybe rocking side to side or front to back, or other things that you test when you're doing the saddle fit?
Really, I don't remember the last time, Farley, that I had a saddle or a customer come in and brought a saddle that was too wide. I'm sure I've had a few over the years. Everything we get here is just grossly too narrow.
Okay.
And typically, a lot of that feature is, I know a lot of the saddle makers and tree makers, they love the number 7, so they buy a saddle or a tree with a 7-inch gullet, and they let the tree maker decide what the bar spread or the shape of the bar is going to be. So there's Arizona bars, there's different bars that are out there, and typically those bars it's the shape of the bar or the width of the bar, the profile. So there's just so many discussions that haven't even been made or had prior to that tree being ordered to being put in a tree, put in a saddle, sold to a store, or sold to a custom saddle maker that ends up on the streets trying to perform a function. So there's just a big breakdown in communication in this process. And that's what we've done, try to do different here, is we have that conversation and we're able to have that conversation just from our institutional knowledge of being around horses and identifying problems early. So you have to have that conversation about what works and what doesn't. So as far as a rock is important, but for us, we want to get the saddle has to fit in front first. A lot of people, like I said earlier, the untrained eye goes to the back. Most of the action is the front 2/3 of the saddle. So that's what we're most concerned with. And if you can get that horse happy, then the sky's the limit. One thing I will do to show people how drastic it can be, that horse is standing still and he's square, and I'll get people, a customer, to stick their hand up either side under that bar, and I will take the lead rope and I'll put that horse's feet not moving. I'll pull that horse's head one way, then the other, and I'll let them feel that relief and that pressure. So like a rope horse or a barrel horse, if they're running into a barrel and they're going 25, 30 miles an hour, and all of a sudden they're asked to shut down, stop, turn, roll back, and go, that's a pretty dramatic exercise if in proper equipment. But can you imagine if your equipment's not proper, what kind of bind that horse has to be in to perform in? So when they see that, people are like, oh my goodness, and their feet aren't even moving. So if it's that tight and that horse is under that much distress, just you can imagine what it's going to be like when you add a pad. Now you're worse. Now their feet are moving. So you really got to break it down and kind of back into it. So that's what we do. So, as far as getting into rock and sway, I don't get into a lot of that sway. A lot of times we'll just add to the problem. But most everything I see is in the front 2/3 of the saddle. And if we have a saddle that's kicked up in the back, it's just kind of an exclamation point on the whole process.
I see. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So what about, so if you get into saddle fit, and you should, but it can be a little bit of a pricey process because saddles aren't cheap. So kind of,
no, they're not.
What would be your recommendation after learning all this saddle fit there, but other maybe thought processes you have on starting this process so that you can be as efficient as possible, because just like saddle fit, along with everything else we're doing, there's a lot of factors that go into the process.
A lot of opinions also.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I think a lot of it is just kind of know where you are on the learning curve. If you're early in on the learning curve, you obviously want to find somebody with more knowledge than you, but just because you're early in and they have more doesn't mean they have enough knowledge. So you want to find somebody that actually owns horses, that's owned horses for a long period of time, actually, that's somebody that knows the difference, and vet their credentials and do your due diligence and do some research. And then if you're actually going to purchase, make sure there's a satisfaction guarantee clause that the saddle can be returned. We tell everybody here that even that's why we do a lot of saddle fits, is we want to make sure when you leave, we've done everything we can do and you're positive. But even if we do a saddle fit, I've had a few over the years, and they got home, maybe they bought the wrong seat size or they changed their mind. They know that there's never a bad choice or bad decision. You come back and get what you want. But make sure you're buying from somebody that actually has the institutional knowledge. And we are not the only ones in the country doing saddle fits. I don't think there's a very long list of people that are qualified to do them. I'm sure there's several people doing them that I don't know. But in this part of the world, there's not many people doing them. And like I said, it's not a sales job, it's a service job. And they're really easy. I get a lot of people that show up and they back a horse off and they feel like the horse is a white elephant. It's going to be hard to fit, but it's all about having the right tools, and the tools are those trees, the tools that are the correct setup for today's modern horse, and the right bar shapes. And then we have to build the saddle correctly on that tree to make it do what they need to do for today's Western horse. So the trees are there's some great saddle makers in the world, particularly here in Texas and Oklahoma. This part of the world, there's so many horses everywhere but I just, as I've run into these guys, and a lot of these guys are just great craftsmen, and they're artisans, they're artists, but a lot of them don't have horses. They're buying trees from guys that don't have horses. It's kind of like me getting in a lady's shoe business. I just have no intuition. I've got to hire some ladies. I hope I hire the right ones, because I don't have any idea what I'm doing. And I found that in the saddle business, and like as you mentioned, Farley, it is a big investment. So it's amazing how this industry has evolved over the years and really has not been challenged by many people. And we're just challenging conventional wisdom. And let's just get it right the first time.
Sure. Now, you guys not only make your own saddles there, but you carry other brands as well?
There's one brand we carry, Martin Saddlery.
Okay.
It's a great brand in North Texas. We carry the barrel saddle. That is the only brand of saddle that we carry that we don't build.
Okay.
And we feel like they're solid enough in their position, their posture in the barrel racing market that we represent that brand and have a good partnership with them. But one thing about us and about me that's a little different is we want to be able to stand behind them. And if South Texas Tack is stamped on it, then we're not just building it because we're going to try to make more money on it. We're building it because we couldn't find what we needed. And chances are, if we could find it, we'd have to pay too much and charge a customer too much. So I'm all about value. And value to me, there's two components. It's quality and price. I think so many people, when they hear the word value, they think about just cheap or cost. You can't take the quality part out of the equation. So quality and price is what makes value, and we're just value driven here. And we use everything in the store, and if it works for us, it's going to work for everybody else. And of course, we stand behind it.
Sure, absolutely. So let's step a little more into maybe another loaded question when we talk about saddle fit. Let's talk a little bit about saddle pads. Because that's you get 1,000 more opinions about saddle pads than you even do saddle fit. But I'll let you lead the way treading through this question.
This was another deal. We have another brand called Let's Rope, and last year it's a new brand that's 2 years old, and we have some of this information that's online at southtexastack.com or letsrope.com in digital copy. But we felt like we were really compelled to go down another funnel, so to speak, and it was doing a saddle pad study. So I feel like a lot of people are interested in saddle fit, but there's more people interested in saddle pad theory, and it's pretty confusing. There's a lot of products on the market. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I really see it's the same thing. It's monkey see, monkey do. So if you go to a rodeo, horse show, whatever, jackpot, whatever it is, and you see the man or woman that beats you or that's most competitive, whatever their setup is simply what becomes status quo. So we went last year to a vet clinic here that Dr. Kurt Heide is a good friend of mine, and he obliged us, and we took a couple of my horses, ranch horses, and since you can't x-ray through leather, we took barium paste and put in a tube and taped down the horse's back and did the same with a bunch of different saddle pad setups. And we videoed or x-rayed these horses with the saddle pads on them, and so you'd see a line down the horse's back and then a line where the saddle pad was. So then we put a sack of feed, which weighed 50 pounds, on top of the horse and re-x-rayed it. And there was only one pad in the industry that the two lines became one with weight. And I really feel like that's where it was going, but it was really interesting to see, and we published it, and we had tremendous feedback. So it's really important. So as we talk about saddle pad, to jump back, to rewind a little bit, I feel like less is more. I think sometimes the ropers and the guys that ranch for a living, they'll put a blanket underneath a contour pad. So a contour pad, any contour is better than no contour. You just want to make sure we go back to the people building trees and saddles don't have horses. A lot of these people building these patterns for these contour pads, I don't think they've even seen a horse, unless it's a fiberglass horse. So you want to make sure most of the horses I see and I own, their withers are set up somewhat higher than the back of their wither. So we want to make sure that pattern accommodates those horses. With that being said, a lot of these products are really well made, and they're sewn down with leather over the withers and down the spine of the back. So that leather controls the pattern. So the more control you have, the less flexibility, the fewer horses are going to fit. So I found a pad that's made by Professional Choice. It's their Air Ride pad, their SMX. It's a contour pad that I just love. That pad's been around forever, and about, I think, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, they made it into a contour. And the reason I like that pad, you can see in the clinical study we did, it's spineless. There's no leather. There's down the back. There's nothing over the wither. It'll virtually fit any shape of horse you put it on because each side works independent of the other. So that is a pad we recommend, and it fits everything. So to take that one step further, we talk about what's enough. I said earlier, less is more. I feel like if you're doing anything other than maybe even roping, a 3/4 inch total pad is all you need. If you're going to ranch and you're going to run a lot of steers, 1 inch is plenty. But it's all about, the Indians 200 years ago had it right. They wrote bareback as about close contact. Us white guys, we screwed it up. We went build these really thick, heavy saddles, put on these thick pads in there, and we just deleverage the horse, and we taken ourselves back on that horse's back where they really can't feel us. So I feel like if I can feel a horse's feet, not just his motion, but I can feel, if I know where all 4 feet are at, that horse can feel my feet, there's a greater chance of successful communication. And that's what we're about. So I can take a saddle, a client, we've done a saddle fit here in the parking lot, and walk in here and grab a pad and go back out with a saddle that I've graded an A plus, and I can make it not fit with the wrong saddle pad. That's how important saddle pads are. I can't take a B to an A saddle fit, but I can take an A down to a B or a C with the wrong pad, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and that's pretty incredible because it takes a whole package to get right, and we've gotten through the major factor of the saddle fit, but now we've got to add the saddle pad in it, and that can, as you just said, make you or break you.
And there's so many products. My office here at the store is back in the warehouse, and as I walk out through the store on the retail floor, I go through one of the first departments is saddle pads, and I see a lot of people just standing there in awe, like they're not quite sure what to do, and they're in the market, whether they realize they have a problem or not, just for a new product, and there's just too many options. So we try to consolidate it for them, and we don't try to really push one brand over the other. We just really talk about what their needs are, and here's the benefits, or maybe this pad doesn't offer as much benefit, but a lot of it's budget. All of us, everybody's budget oriented, so pads have gotten expensive. When I was a kid, the best pad you could buy was $75. Now it's hard to find many that cost $75. Most of them are $275.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're well made; they'll last a while, but it's a whole other issue. So you can find some really neat stuff on our website at southtexastack.com or letsrope.com under articles and studies, and they're in depth, and it's all about see and believe in a picture's worth 1,000 words, and once you see it, you'll never forget it. That's really what it's about. It's just bringing awareness to the viewership and readership.
Absolutely, and that's what I really like about you guys is that you're working on making all of this better, and it's not about pushing a product, it's about doing what's right for the horse and rider and getting the right thing so that they can go achieve their goals.
Absolutely. Horses are my sanctuary, Farley. I've been around horses since I could walk, and they're absolutely, and they will always be my sanctuary. So for me, I'm just an advocate of the horse, and I think a lot of horses, especially with a lot of beginners, they don't have that communication. They don't understand. They can't communicate with that horse. They just don't have the institutional knowledge. So that's really a big part of what we do here is try to help people. Of course, we don't go solicit that. They call us, and we just feel good about ourselves and about our service when we help people that truly need the help. And it makes you feel good, and makes you smile. And I think they're a lot of people's sanctuaries.
Oh, absolutely. And whether you are have top performance goals or not, I completely agree with you that they are a sanctuary for a lot of people. Mm-hmm.
We get that's a great point. We get a lot of recreational riders in here, and some of them their spouses don't ride, or the wife does, the husband doesn't. They bought 3 or 4 saddles, they don't work, and the husband's frustrated, and he's like, honey, I'm going to buy you one more saddle, and if it doesn't work, I'm selling the horse, the truck, the trailer. So it can be pretty emotional sometimes, and so we assure them that this is going to be right. There's no bad decision. You can't make a wrong decision. These are the facts. Here's how it works, and people are relieved when they have access to the information. It's just really having access. And we talked earlier, you can Google a lot of things in life, and Google can help you. But when you get into horses and cattle, and especially these technical aspects, Google can't help you much.
No, Google can't. My tribe and I have several sayings, but one of them is get in the truck. And sometimes you just got to get in the truck and go experience and do, because you can't always read or research something.
No, that's right. And I've had a few people over the years. I've had quite a few skeptics that come in here, and I love them when I get them, because we usually we do a saddle fit with a saddle. But if you get a real skeptic that's real worried, then I'll actually go get some trees that's in those saddles and peel everything back and just let them see it once they see it. But I've had some people leave over the years scratching their head, and they'll call me in a couple of weeks like, Mr. Martin, you're right. And Thank you. So it's pretty rewarding for us. But horses have evolved. I mean, the horses are different. They were 10 or 20, 30 years ago. I think they're going to continue to change. There's been a trend in the show horse world that I came from. The horses got big in the late 90s and early 2000s. I don't know, and I think the horses are they're going to get a little smaller. We're in the cutting business too, and the rope horses and the ranch horses, and they've brought a lot of size out of those horses. Those horses are starting to get big again. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that, you're involved, and you see those changes coming, so you can make those changes before they happen and affect a lot of people. I think that's really important. And just remember, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. So you got to file that back and process it, and don't be afraid to call somebody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's great to have resources, and I'm just trying to push the conversation forward for everybody, to have resources of where to go and what to do. So let me ask you this: we talk about horses evolving and changing. I've heard it said that saddle fit affects muscular development through there. You hear from the 80s, 90s. Well, that horse is developed high withers or hasn't developed any withers, and I've heard a lot of people say, well, you have the right fit, that muscle will develop there properly. Kind of what's your thoughts? Does that make sense? Kind of where I'm going with that. What's kind of your thoughts on saddle fit musculature?
I don't think it'll help a horse develop further. I think it'll create some obstacles for that horse. I think that horse's genetics were in place before birth, and I think that horse is going to be what he is. I think there's a lot of environmental factors, and maybe that's what you're discussing, and a lot of that is how fit that horse is, how conditioned he is, what kind of feed program. I get a lot of recreational riders that bring horses into me, and most of the horses, for the most part, look really well. People take pride in their horses, so I don't see condition and fit. I see a few horses that are maybe a little overweight, but that's not a problem. But then this goes on to kind of begs the question that I get people in here a lot. They go, well, my horse it's summertime, it's August in Texas, it's hot. Normally in the winter, this horse has 100 pounds. His structure, his profile doesn't change. He just gets a little more cover, or she gets a little more cover. That won't change saddle fit. So it's really like a custom pair of shoes or a custom pair of boots. You can gain or lose 10 or 20 pounds. Your feet really stay the same. It's the same thing as your feet. They're just skeletons. This is what a horse is. So you can gain a little cover, lose a little cover. The saddle fit's going to stay the same. That's not really, I guess, as some skeptics come in here and go, well, my horse is I'm going to really ride him this fall, and we're going to lose 150 pounds, will the saddle still fit? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that's a great question, great point. We get some entry-level people ask that question, but really the horses anatomically won't change. They're the same.
Awesome. Yeah, and I love that analogy that it's like having a custom pair of shoes or a custom pair of boots. I like that.
Yeah, your feet might swell up, but they're going to go back down, so everything still stays the same. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, you just want to find somebody that knows more about it than you do. Does that person know enough to actually help you get a saddle or get a saddle fit? I don't know, but if you continue to climb that ladder and get to a group or a pool of knowledge where you're comfortable, it's all about you being comfortable. Most people in life, if you go with your gut, if you're with somebody and you feel like they know more than you but really don't know enough, you need to keep climbing that ladder till you get into a pool of knowledge where you feel comfortable, and you'll know when you're there. There will be no pressure. It's all about education. And if you feel pressure, you're probably in the wrong situation. And then the greatest reward for us is the feedback. I encourage the people when they leave here to please call back and let us know. If they can't get a hold of me, let somebody here know that one of my associates, that's the big feather in our hat is that feedback, whether it's a recreational rider or somebody that makes a living in the horse business. I love that feedback. Very important. Absolutely.
It's all about everybody winning. Like let's move the needle forward and let everybody win at their goals and their race, and there's room for everybody.
And the customers are the ones that are paying me, but the horses are the ones that are really, they're the ones that I owe it to. They're the ones that are really paying me, and that's why I do it. The horses, I've never found a horse I couldn't get along with or didn't like, and some are a little easier to get along with, but at the end of the day, I'm doing it for the horses. And I feel that there's a lot of groups down here. Texas A&M University, Texas State 4-H. There's some groups that are really involved in our local area down here, and we have them over, and I go see them, and you can really tell that when people are genuinely interested about saddle fit and being correct, and it helps carry that conversation, kick the can down the road a little further, and as people spread, then that's called continuing education.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, it's free. It's free. It just takes a little time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as we kind of wrap things up today, if we talked about your website some throughout the conversation, but if somebody's listening to this and they want to talk to you or your associates, direct us where we need to go to reach out.
Absolutely. So our website is southtexastack.com. If you go to letsrope.com, it'll take you to South Texas Tack. Either one of those web pages, you go to articles. There'll be some saddle fit, the saddle pad, anything we produce, whether it's a digital or print piece, will be there. You can access that information. And absolutely, we're open 6 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5:30. The number here at the store, there's several numbers, but the number is 979-421-8800. Any one of the call center representative ladies will answer the phone. They will track me down or take a message. I get emails every week with profile pictures of horses and for evaluations, and I encourage any of that. It's a little more of a challenge to do remotely, but at least I can look at your horse and maybe make some observations, look at the saddle. I can tell. I've been doing it a long time, really, just when a saddle's sitting on a horse without a pad, I can really tell what it feels like, even though my hand's not sticking up in there. But we might be able to help you and get down the road a little further and get you directed to some resolutions. But we're welcome. All those emails, all the phone calls, any way we can help.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to have a conversation with me today. And I want to have more conversations about other things in the future here on the Rider's Edge podcast.
Well, I'm honored to be on the Rider's Edge, and I really commend you for what you're doing and reaching out. The podcast is great, and anytime we can be of help. But I want to reiterate one more thing, Farley. This is my opinion. There's always somebody who's going to have a different opinion.
Absolutely.
That's how debates get started. So I love to debate it with anybody, but it's just my opinion, and it's served us well over the years. So we're continuing education, and we continue to learn things and evolve. But thank you so much, and feel free to reach out to us anytime.
Absolutely.
And good luck.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Rider's Edge podcast today. We appreciate your time and attention. Thank you for always helping us move the conversation forward. If you liked today's podcast, please help us keep the conversations going by subscribing to this podcast and consider leaving us a review so others can find us and join in on the conversations. You can also find more information by checking us out on our social media channels, including Facebook at Rider's Edge Therapy and Wellness, Instagram at Rider's Edge Therapy, and our website, www.ridersedgetherapy.com. It is there that you can book a consult for either you or your horse. Thank you, and as always, we will see you down the road.